Use your hatred to reave their souls. I can make it possible. Become my soul reaver, my angel of death.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome. I'm Josh Strife-Hayes, and today we're returning to Raziel, navigating Nosgoth and seeking revenge with the Soul Reaver as we kill our vampiric brethren, consume their souls, and reality switch our way to kill Kain in the 1999 epic platforming adventure game, Legacy of Kain: Soul Reaver. I'm going to replay the whole game, vanquish all the vampires, search out all the secrets, and then dive into some of the hidden cut content, before finally asking the simple question, Soul Reaver, was it actually any good? As usual, a massive thank you to all the supporters on Patreon and Twitch who keep the channel alive. More information on how you can support at the end. For now, let's begin. Soul Reaver was a third-person action-adventure game released for the PlayStation 1, Windows PC, and Dreamcast. It actually went on to become the 62nd best-selling PlayStation 1 game of all time. And while the hype around a new Legacy of Kain game has died somewhat, the series as a whole still has a hardcore fanbase, with some players even working on a graphical remaster of the game. In this video, I'll be playing the PlayStation 1 version because it's the version I had as a kid, although I am aware many people consider this the graphically inferior version. Soul Reaver was actually the second game in the Legacy of Kain series. Blood Omen, a 2D top-down adventure released 2 years prior in 1997, and has you play as Kain, a human noble killed and then resurrected as a vampire hell-bent on taking revenge against his assassins. Soul Reaver shifted the gameplay from the 2D top-down of Blood Omen into 3D and introduces the character of Raziel, one of Kain's vampiric lieutenants within Kain's new vampiric world. And as a game was followed by Soul Reaver 2 in 2001, Blood Omen 2 in 2002, and Legacy of Kain: Defiance in 2003. There was also Nosgoth, a multiplayer team-based arena battle game focused on vampires versus humans, but this never went into full release and was cancelled in 2016. We need to quickly touch on one of the most important members of the Legacy of Kain team, Amy Hennig. Amy worked as a design manager on the original Blood Omen and then wrote and directed Soul Reaver, Soul Reaver 2 and Defiance. She then went on to direct Jak 3 and then wrote and directed Uncharted 1, 2 and 3, consulting on 4. So this woman clearly knows how to write an epic adventure story. Video games in the mid to late 90s were really starting to explore how games weren't just gameplay, they were also vehicles for storytelling. And Soul Reaver wasn't just a set of mechanics, it was an adventure story with characters, locations, motivations and emotions. This game features many excellent cutscenes with some of the finest writing and voice acting in video game history. So let's boot it up and enjoy the opening. Now originally I'd left the complete cutscene in because it's worth watching. The background music is epic and orchestral and the voice acting is absolute top quality, but doing that got the entire video copyright claimed, so here's a brief rundown without using the music. Kain is a vampiric lord. We are Raziel, the youngest of his lieutenants. Kain created us many years ago. Now the plan was for us to serve Kain until Kain evolved into a more powerful form of vampire. Unfortunately, we grew wings before Kain did, and this makes Kain extremely jealous, so he breaks our wings and then throws us into the swirling vortex of eternal damnation for having the tenacity to evolve before he did. Now water is like acid to vampires, so we burn up for 500 years in this vortex, but then somehow we get back up to the deep resonating voice of some ancient elder god telling us we are worthy.
I know you, Raziel. You are worthy.
What madness is this? What pitiful form is this that I have come to inhabit? Death would be a release next to this travesty.
You did not survive the abyss, Raziel. I have only spared you from total dissolution.
I would choose oblivion over this existence.
The choice is not yours.
I am destroyed.
You are reborn. The birth of one of Kain's abominations traps the essence of life. It is this soul that animates the corpse you lived in. And that, Raziel, is the demise of Nosgoth. There is no balance. The souls of the dead remain trapped. I cannot spin them in the wheel of fate. They cannot complete their destinies. Redeem yourself. Or if you prefer, avenge yourself. Settle your dispute with Cain. Destroy him and your brethren. Free their souls and let the wheel of fate churn again. Use your hatred to reave their souls. I can make it possible. Become my soul reaver, my angel of death.
So we are Raziel, a vampiric lieutenant of Cain's. Cain himself is the almost deified ruler of the land and was expecting to evolve into a more powerful being pretty soon, but through a cruel twist of fate, we grew wings before Cain did. Cain gets extremely jealous of this and throws us into the swirling vortex of eternal damnation. Remember, water will kill vampires, so we burn there for 500 years while Cain messes up the land while we're gone, somehow creating an unnatural situation where the physical and spiritual realms are no longer in harmony and things simply cannot die. We are then brought back into horrific unlife by some ancient elder entity who tasks us with killing Cain and allowing the land to return to its harmonic state of things dying like they should. It's just a coincidence that the elder god needs Cain killed and we are the perfect ex-vampire to do it, because it also allows us to take revenge on Cain for the whole eternal damnation thing. So it's a pretty complex revenge plot. Cool, but you might recognise those voices. So let's break down the cast because it is stellar. Raziel is voiced by Michael Bell, the guy behind Gleemax from Ratchet and Clank and Chaz and Drew in the Rugrats. Cain is voiced by Simon Templeman, who has voiced a ton of characters including Terran Loghain in the Dragon Age series, Gabriel Roman in the Uncharted series, and multiple voices in Star Wars The Old Republic. Interesting fact, he is married to the actress Rosalind Chow, who played Kiku O'Brien in Star Trek The Next Generation, and Simon Templeman did himself, for one episode, appear in Star Trek The Next Generation. The Elder God, your guiding force in this dying world, is Tony J, the deep, bassy voice behind Frollo in The Hunchback of Notre Dame and Megabyte in the reboot series, who also appeared in Star Trek The Next Generation. So with a competent cast and crew, let's play. We start in the Elder God room, an underwater cavern with Cthulhu-like tentacles snaking around the wall. We run down the only path and find the first warp gate. The land of Nosgoth is somewhat open world, but some paths require certain skills gained from killing bosses. So there's a degree of linear critical path to follow which opens up as you gain more skills. Think of it like the Legend of Zelda games. You can go to lots of places, but you can only advance in a specific order. And these warp gates, once activated, allow you to warp to any other activated gate. So we run on some more and find some green souls.
You are weak. You must feed.
The old hunger has left me. I have no desire for blood.
You are changed. Your bloodthirst is replaced by a deeper need. You have become a devourer of souls. To sustain your strength, you must hunt the lost spirits of the underworld and consume the souls of your enemies.
Your life is shown by the jagged green spiral to the bottom right. Hold circle to pull the cloth mask away from your jawless face and devour any nearby souls to refill your life. We'll look at death later. Now we get to jumping. Hold X to jump. We have a small, a medium and then a large wall to jump, showing you can scramble up ledges if you're close enough to grab, and then high jumps. Hold L1 to crouch and then jump for a boost. And then we get gliding. While our wings are broken and we can't fly, we can still pull the dead skin out to glide slowly over the gaps. And now our first enemy.
What scabrous wretches are these?
Stua, the scavengers of the underworld. Their feral hunger has claimed countless souls, spirits who now shall never find their rest.
Combat is relatively basic, but does change slightly depending on whether you're in the physical or spiritual realm. Right now we're in the spirit realm and it's simply a case of hit stuff until it dies. Hold R1 to lock on, press square to attack. If the hit lands, follow up with more square attacks for a combo. You can press X to dodge out the way. If you dodge toward an enemy, you'll actually dodge into them while attacking, which is super useful because you can interrupt enemy attacks. When spirit enemies die, they become translucent and are now food. You can hold circle to feed on them. And now we find the first portal to the physical world.
These portals are your conduit between the spectral and material realms. With their aid, you may gather matter and will yourself to become manifest in the physical world. This is taxing, however. Your strength must first be fully restored. You require no conduit to return to this plane. You may abandon your physical body at any time.
Soul Reaver is made up of two overlapping realities, the physical realm and the spiritual realm. In the spirit realm, once you're at full health, you can use these portals alone to switch back to the physical realm. And this switching mechanic is one of the coolest aspects of Soul Reaver. The entire land exists in both realms at the same time, but the spirit realm is a horrific, twisted version, with impossible geometry and warped mountains, towers and lakes, and several puzzles need you to exploit these differences in geography by switching back and forth between the spiritual and physical to progress. While you can only switch from the spiritual realm to the physical realm when you're at full health and standing on a portal, you can switch back to the spirit realm at any time. While in the physical world, however, you will constantly take damage, and if you die, you'll revert back to the spirit world. If you die in the spirit world, which is difficult but possible, you'll be sent back to the Elder God starting room. So you're basically immortal. Death is just a setback, and as much as I want to mention Dark Souls, I won't yet. Back in the physical world, we can see a gate that we can't pass through and a climbable wall that we can't scale. Raziel will gain more skills over time, and returning to earlier areas with new skills to unlock new places is a core part of Soul Reaver's world design. While in the spectral realm, you can't interact with anything. You can't push buttons or open doors, and water in the spirit realm acts exactly like air, so you just fall through it. Everything also has a green tint to it, and ethereal colours tend to dance on the edge of your vision, giving the whole thing a dreamlike quality. Even the audio design has a more distant feel. But back in the physical world, you can interact with objects, open doors and climb surfaces, but falling into water will instantly kill you and send you back to the spirit realm. You'll also notice while you're in the physical realm, our hit point spiral has been smoothed out into a regular spiral to reflect the more stable nature of the physical world. So we push on down the only route open to us and find our first physical enemies.
What are these creatures?
Do you not recognize them? They are the children of your brother, Duma.
That's impossible. These foul, scuttling beasts could not be kin of our high blood?
Do you suppose that time stood still for you, Raziel? Much has changed since you passed from the world of men.
I knew my opponent's weaknesses, having suffered them myself. Physical wounds are fleeting. Vampire's immortal flesh begins to close as soon as it is cleaved. Vampires need only fear those wounds that impale or inflame. Water scorches like acid, and fledglings are devastated by sunlight's touch. I would have to modify my tactics to suit my foes.
Combat in the physical realm is a bit different. The enemies you'll face are the 500-year-old spawn of your vampiric brothers, and as vampires themselves, they can't be killed by just being slapped around enough. You'll need to use the environment or weapons. Once you've hit a physical enemy enough, they become stunned. You'll see bloodstains on their body and they'll start to sway. You can now press triangle to grapple them and pick them up, and you'll have a short time to carry them and throw them, either into water, fire, sunlight, or onto something spiky. Tougher enemies can't be carried as far. Killing an enemy releases its soul so you can eat it, but a very important note. If you impale an enemy with a spear and then don't eat its soul, and then remove the spear, the enemy will get straight back up, because you need to eat the soul to destroy an impaled body. The first fight not only tells you this, but gives you access to spikes, sunlight, and water, and the camera angle showing the water even shows a strange spinning artifact under the water, hinting at secrets for later. Kill the enemies and now we get access to blocks. You can move blocks, pushing them around and later flipping them. In fact, the later sections of the game really push block puzzles to the extreme. So we move this block over to a ledge and jump up. What I adore about Soul Reaver's intro is it introduces a mechanic, explains it, and then gives you a chance to use it immediately. It's densely packed and extremely efficient. It gets the player very confident with Raziel's core moveset very quickly. The whole intro is brief and yet very well paced. So we head outside and reach the Sanctuary of the Clans.
My God! The Sanctuary of the Clans, reduced to ruin. Beyond these walls lay the pillars of Nosgoth, the seat of Kain's empire. How humble it now appeared, collapsing into the dust of its former magnificence. And yet, I had only just emerged. In the instant between my execution and resurrection, centuries had apparently passed.
This world is wrecked with cataclysms. The earth strains to shrug off the pestilence of Kain's parasitic empire. The fate of this world was preordained in an instant by a solitary man. Unwilling to martyr himself to restore Nosgoth's balance, Kain condemned the world to the decay you see. In that moment, the unraveling began. Now it is nearly played out. Nosgoth teeters on the brink of collapse. Its fragile balance cannot hold.
We need to get into the Sanctuary. It's likely where we'll find Kain, but the doors are locked, so we need to search for a way in. This is also the first time you'll encounter spears and generates one of my very few complaints with the game. The game doesn't actually mention spears at all. It just kind of lets you figure it out. You can grab them if you're close enough to the tip with square, and then you'll attack with them. You can also hold triangle to throw them, and if you throw them at an unsuspecting enemy by holding R1 to sneak up on someone, you'll impale them instantly without having to fight. Kind of like a backstab. Down another path you'll find this very striking door, meaning another gate room. Now, gates don't have names, they have symbols, and you'll need to memorize the symbol of all the gates to know where you are teleporting to. Now, if you were remaking this game, it would be a super useful feature to have a list of symbols, or maybe even a map. And this brings up my biggest single complaint about Soul Reaver, the single factor that is keeping this game a 9 out of 10 and not a 10 out of 10. It does not have an in-game map. Soul Reaver is a pseudo-open world game about exploration, secret areas, and backtracking. Like I said, it's very heavily modelled on Legend of Zelda. It's a complex, interconnected world, and yet there's no map. Now, you can find maps online. In fact, there's a fascinating website called The Lost Worlds, chronicling the entire development history of Soul Reaver, including all iterations of the world map as it was being developed, and a load of cut content that we'll have a look at later, but for now, the actual map of the land looks like this. Now, I know comparisons to games like Dark Souls and Elden Ring is going to come up a lot, so let's just address these points. Much like the Souls games, Soul Reaver is about your adventure through an already destroyed world. You're arriving after the fact, after the events have happened, and picking up the pieces. You're exploring remains and fighting through the resulting flood of corpses, but unlike the Soulsborne games, Soul Reaver does not have a super deep combat system. It's actually pretty simple, hit and then dodge. If in the physical world you have the whole use the environment mechanic. And you've got some spears, but each spear has the same moveset. So while combat is nothing too groundbreaking, it's also not really the focus. Soul Reaver is a platformer, and it's the exploration and world which really set it apart, because just like Dark Souls, or the more recent Elden Ring, Soul Reaver starts somewhat linear but then opens up. It has massive optional areas that you can completely miss. I even found an area I'd never been to before while replaying the game for this video, and I've completed this game multiple times. Beyond that, Soul Reaver also has a magic system. Spells Raziel can find and then spend magical energy to cast, but they're also completely hidden. If you follow the critical path of Soul Reaver to finish the game as fast as possible, you will miss about a third of the game world, and you will completely miss the magic system. In his video on Elden Ring in extra punctuation, Yahtzee mentioned how open worlds work well when they have the confidence to not lead the player to every single bit, to let areas be missed. And it's this confidence in mystery that makes Soul Reaver feel so special to play. Your journey to kill Kain won't show you the full game. only your curiosity will do that. The magic system also hides spells and glyphs in the far reaches of the map, often behind complex puzzles, block puzzles, bell ringing puzzles, or jumping and gliding puzzles. It's a game which has no issue actively hiding content from the average player. And this is where the Legend of Zelda comparison gets strengthened. The open world is limited by your skill set, which is gained from defeating bosses and combines many optional, missable areas. Soul Reaver is basically Legend of Zelda's goth phase. And the main issue with this intricate world is the lack of map to help navigate it. Many players believe a map would reduce the feeling of the size of the world or make the game feel too linear, but just like The Legend of Zelda or Elden Ring, I don't want the map to force you down a path. I want it to allow you to discover others. It should be a tool to enhance curiosity, not to dictate your adventure. No map also means no compass, and when we leave the Sanctuary of the Clans, we find the same abyss that we were thrown into 500 years ago.
This, at least, had remained constant. The endlessly swirling vortex of the abyss, my tomb, and the womb of my rebirth. Though much of Nosgoth's landscape had changed, these cliffs gave me my bearings. My clan territory was to the west. I was anxious to see how my descendants had fared during the centuries of my absence.
Being told our clan is to the west is difficult to use with no compass, but it does give us something to go on, because when the cutscene ends, the camera has been moved around to face the direction, which is a nice narrative design touch. Raziel's old stronghold has fallen into disrepair and is infested with more lesser vampires, and hey, we can move this big block, but this item is still not accessible. Remember this for later. We unlock the teleport gate here, and oh, here's a nice touch. Physical objects can't move in the spirit realm. So if you walk into water while carrying a spear, when you get sent back to the spirit realm because the water kills you, the spear remains suspended in the air, left where you were holding it. And this long sloped hall actually opens into a much larger room, but for now this is a dead end. Remember this room though, and this spear that we left, because it will be important later. One of the graphical touches I love, which really helps lend an air of personality to each area, is how the spear design changes. Each clan has their own unique symbol and design of spear, and some human areas have human spears. There's even a unique harpoon spear found on a boat halfway through the game, and sometimes you can just pull metal railings off the wall and use them as spears if you're in a more industrial area. Everyone ends up finding their own favourite spear design and trying to carry it with them through the rest of the game, which of course fails when you have to switch to Spectral. It feels like kicking a rock most of the way home and then losing it in a grate. Run up some spiral stairs, flip a switch and open a bridge, fight some tougher vampires, and then don't attack this human. Because if we leave this guy alive, we actually unlock a hidden faction reputation mechanic. Humans still exist in and then don't run up some spiral stairs, flip a switch and open a bridge, fight some tougher vampires, and then don't attack this human. Because if we leave this guy alive, we actually unlock a hidden faction reputation mechanic. Humans still exist in Nosgoth, mainly in the human stronghold to the north of the map, but that stronghold is a completely optional area. You can finish the game multiple times and never go there. But here's the cool part. There is a hidden respect system. If you kill the first human being you encounter, humans will hate you and attack you on sight. But if you leave him alive, the rest of the humans that you encounter will now drop to their knees and worship you. They'll even let you feed a very small amount on their soul without becoming aggressive. This makes collecting all of the hidden magical spells later on a lot easier, as one of them needs you to travel through the human stronghold, and if the humans see you as a deity, they just let you waltz in and take it. We push on through our own stronghold and out the other side and reach the graveyard, the outskirts of the clan of our brother Malkaya.
This charnel house bore the unmistakable marks of Malkaya's clan. To what depths had our dynasty plummeted if these ghouls were the descendants of my high-born brother? Were they so debased as to recruit fledglings from the desiccated corpses here interred?
With the Sanctuary of the Clans locked, we may as well pay a visit to our youngest vampiric brother Malchiah, see how he's fared over the last 500 years in this slowly decaying world. So we push on into this graveyard charnel house and eventually find a room that we can't climb, and this is the first major puzzle needing us to switch back and forth from physical to spectral, and our first encounter with a wraith.
Beware, Raziel. These wraiths are vampire spirits, fettered too long in the spectral realm. When their vampire natures adapt to this plane, they become eaters of souls. Do not allow these spirits to re-inhabit their corpses.
Wraiths only exist in the spiritual world, but they do have a body in the physical, and if they're able to get back to that body, you'll have to deal with the physical enemy as well. In the spiritual world, they just have more health, they're not really that much of a threat. So we traverse this room by switching back and forth between realities, and then a new move. Flip blocks up onto ledges, which is another perfect example of a new mechanic being introduced in an unmissable way, and then immediately required for a larger puzzle. Soul Reaver does stacking its mechanics together exceptionally well. And now the pendulum puzzle, which not only needs us to switch between the physical and spectral, but also teaches the player how to exploit physics in both. Standing on this pendulum-style platform in the physical drops it down one side because of our weight while raising the other. And then the entire puzzle is about flipping blocks to figure out a way back to the first room, but this time we can switch to the spectral realm and jump onto the higher side of the pendulum in the spectral realm, which means it doesn't move, letting you jump across the room. And now another advancement in block puzzles. Flipping doesn't just raise or lower blocks, it can also switch their facing. And now we need to flip the blocks to match the symbols in the alcoves before pushing them in. And doing this gets us access to another block higher up, which we can push down to a previous area, and now we can double stack and jump to a new ledge. Multi-leveled dungeons with pushing blocks down holes to be used earlier is another perfect comparison to the old Legend of Zelda dungeons. This brings us to a giant room-size lift, a multi-floor puzzle made of steel and stone. Malchiah is below us, so we need to drop this structure down. So we explore the corridors, and you get the first payoff for sparing that human earlier. This dude won't attack you. The first stage of this puzzle is switching some giant gears back on and then watching this massive mixture of metal and flesh purr into life. And then we push some flaming blocks around a track and use the fire to burn some wooden support beams above them, and then on the lowest level we place the flaming blocks into the central podium to unlock the lowest gate. Now this puzzle is fun on the surface, but if you stop to think about it, it doesn't make too much sense. It works from a purely aesthetic, oh, they go there because it looks nice design level, but as for why this structure was built this way in-universe or what this structure actually does, I have no idea. So we go down the tunnel and find our first brother, Malchiah.
Show yourself, creature!
Do you not recognize me, brother? Am I so changed?
Malchiah?
Yes, brother. You should have stayed where the Master sent you, Raziel. You will find Nosgoth less pleasant than you remember.
What has become of my clan? Answer me, little brother, or I will beat an answer from your horrid lips.
Everyone is afraid, sibling. You awake to a world of fear. These times of change are so unsettling. Do you think I feel no revulsion for this form? Do you believe for a moment that our Lord would risk his empire upon an upstart inheritance?
Enough riddles. What are you saying?
You are the last to die.
All boss fights in Soul Reaver are gimmick fights. You aren't strong enough to go toe-to-toe with any of your brothers in a fistfight because you've been burning in a lake for 500 years and they've been horrifically mutating. And even if you were strong enough, the combat system simply isn't complex enough to really allow that kind of gameplay to be engaging, so you defeat each of them by exploiting the scenery and the arena they are in. Now, each of your brothers has developed a special unique skill and they will use that in the fight against you. Malchiah can phase through insubstantial barriers like spiked gates. So we need to hop around the room, jump into these small alcoves, open these spiked portcullis style gates, wait for him to crawl toward us, and then drop them through him. Eventually, when he is weak, he will phase into the larger central arena and we need to quickly hop away and activate the giant ceiling crusher.
Tell me, Malchiah, where can I find Cain?
The Master is beyond your reach, Raziel. He makes himself known when he sees fit, not when commanded. I am released.
You have done well, Raziel.
Am I reduced to this? A ghoul? A fratricide?
Elevated, Raziel, not reduced. Consuming Malchiah's soul has endowed you with a new gift. Insubstantial barriers such as these are no impediment to you in the spectral realm. Will yourself to pass through, and you shall.
Killing a brother gets you their soul and their specific power, so now we can, while in the spectral realm only, phase through any incomplete barrier. We're told to backtrack to the Sanctuary of the Clans because with this new skill we can now find a way in. But if you decide to just wander off by yourself, you'll find hidden rooms and secret passages already. The world is so densely packed with content it'd be impossible to find it all on your first playthrough. Even just exploring around with the phase power, I managed to pass through a gate and find this strange artifact.
These artifacts enhance your stamina, enabling you to prolong your material manifestation. Gather 5 to complete the emblem, and thereby augment your strength.
Now, the Sanctuary of the Clans is quite a way back, so here's a shortcut. Die in the spirit world on purpose, and you'll be sent back to the Elder God start room. Remember, you're immortal. Oh, also, if you walk onto the green glowing square in the Elder God start room, you'll be reminded about where you need to go.
With Malchiah's gift, your way is opened. Return to the seat of Cain's ill-omened empire. Its sterile silence has secrets yet to unveil.
So we go back to the Sanctuary of the Clans, switch to the Spirit Realm and use our new ability to phase through this gate into the building, and oh look, another artifact. This means there's a life-increasing artifact on the critical gameplay path, so you're guaranteed to be exposed to this mechanic at least once. So we push on inside, fight through a few more enemies, and finally enter the central room and meet Cain.
Raziel.
Cain!
The Abyss has been unkind.
I am your creation, Cain. Now, as before, you criticize your own work. What have you done with my clan, degenerate? You have no right.
What I have made, I can also destroy, child.
Damn you, Cain! You are not God! This act of genocide is unconscionable! Conscience? You dare to speak to me of conscience?
Only when you have felt the full gravity of choice should you dare question my judgment. Your life's span is a flicker compared to the mass of doubt and regret that I have borne since Mortanius first turned me from the light. To know that the fate of the world hangs dependent on the advisedness of my every deed? Can you even begin to conceive what action you would take in my position?
I would choose integrity, Kane.
Look around you, Raziel. See what has become of our empire. Witness the end of an age. The clans scattered to the corners of Nosgoth. This place has outlasted its usefulness. As have you.
The Soul Reaver, Kane's ancient blade, older than any of us and 1,000 times more deadly. The legends claimed that the blade was possessed and thrived by devouring the souls of its victims. For all our bravado, we knew what it meant when Kane drew the Soul Reaver in anger. It meant you were dead.
Soul Reaver is one of the few games where even if you've finished it hundreds of times, you do not skip the cutscenes. The fight with Kane is again gimmicky. He teleports around the room and charges up a burst of energy. You need to run up to him and hit him before he completes the charge. Do this 3 times, and then you've beaten him.
The blade is vanquished, so it unfolds. The blade is vanquished, so it unfolds. And we are a step closer to our destinies.
I swore I saw a glint of satisfaction in Kane's eye when the Soul Reaver was destroyed. I did not understand the game that Kane was playing, but I knew the finishing move.
From this moment and ever afterward, you and this blade are inextricably bound. Soul Reaver and Reaver of Souls, your destinies are intertwined. By destroying the sword, you have liberated it from its corporeal prison and restored it to its true form, a wraith blade, its energy unbound. No longer a physical blade, it can only manifest itself in the material realm when your strength is fully restored. Once manifest, it will sustain you.
The plot thickens. Kane's ancient and powerful sword is called the Soul Reaver, so he draws it and attacks us with it. But the blade shatters, and then we unlock its full potential as a wraith blade which binds itself to us. From now on, while in the spectral realm, you'll always have the Soul Reaver blade. While in the physical realm, you'll only have the blade if you're at full health, but if you are at full health, the blade actually prevents the health drain effect of the physical world. So you're free to remain in the physical realm permanently, provided you're already at full health. Kane then teleports away, and we meet Ariel.
What are you, little soul? Another of Kane's creatures come to taunt this bound spectre.
I did not intend to disturb your rest.
Rest. A body is needed for sleep. Flesh and bones are required to recline. No, child. All I may do is watch and remember, ceaselessly conscious as this wretched world's history unfurls. Ghastly past, insufferable future, are they one and the same? Am I always here?
How have you come to haunt these pillars?
Cain refused the sacrifice. The pillar of balance, corrupted to its core, stands as a monument to his blind ambition. Now these pillars serve only to bind me here, my prison and eternal home, thanks to the avarice of your master, Cain.
That bastard can claim no allegiance from me.
Then we share a common foe, Raziel. Return here when you have need. Ariel remembers what others have forgotten.
Ariel is interesting. She is a major character in the original Blood Omen, but in Soul Reaver she's mostly cut content. That website from earlier helps flesh out her actual backstory. She was the human guardian of the Pillar of Balance in Nosgoth. There's her whole detailed story on the wiki. She was meant to play a much more important role in Soul Reaver, but her involvement in the narrative was heavily cut down last minute, so this is the only time you actually meet her. The Pillar Room now has a healing pad, a magical energy restoration pad, and Ariel can act like the Elder God and remind you of what you're meant to be doing.
Far in the eastern mountains, a stifled titan stands in mute surrender, unwilling host to a parasitic swarm.
We're told to go east beyond the ruins. Now, the only direction we have is knowing Raziel's clan is to the west, so it's a case of return to the vortex and just kind of go the other way. And this takes us back to the small ruins from earlier, the first time we switched from spectral to physical, and a gate which we can now pass through. And this leads to probably one of the most grand and complex sections of the game, Zephon's Cathedral. The cathedral is an imposing building, and I adore the horrific warping of the outer walls as you switch realms. So we head on in to confront our next brother. The cathedral is actually a giant human-built defense against the vampires, the organ acting as a sonic weapon, which in theory could kill all vampiric life in the land. One of the original endings of Soul Reaver actually had Raziel activating the cathedral to cleanse the land of vampires, which is why this area is so grand, but that idea was ultimately scrapped. Inside we see the apocalyptic organ pipes, and by switching realms we see that they start to snake and twist around, letting us climb up them. So we flip some switches, drop some platforms, jump them into place, and then find another block puzzle, this time with murals on the walls and the blocks completing the pictures. One of the main issues you'll face here is there's no reset for the puzzles. If you flip a block into the wrong place, it's up to you to figure out how to undo it, and this can take a while. So we complete the room, unlock a path from earlier, and this is a design we come to see as standard. Do A and B to unlock C from before A and B. Eventually we manage to activate parts of the organ, and this brings an updraft, so we can glide into this and you'll be swept up to the upper levels and more puzzles. Now I hope you've got patience, because this place is big. You know, replaying Soul Reaver, I realised block puzzle was the single mechanic it falls back on the most, and because of this, it really mines the mechanic for all the value it can find in it. People were annoyed at my medieval review, where I mentioned it felt that the mechanics were one and done. The design was almost wasting the potential, and this is what I mean. If you do something once, you don't get to fully explore what it can really be or discover all the intricacies and complexities it has. But look at what they've done with block puzzles. This is another orientation one, but this time it's not just bothered about a single face, it's bothered about multiple, being a pipe completing puzzle. Soul Reaver has not just added in pushing blocks, it's sat down and said, right, what's the absolute limit we can take pushing blocks to? Finishing this puzzle shows a single glass bulb popping somewhere else in the cathedral, revealing a switch underneath, which means we have 3 left to go, which of course means bigger and longer block puzzles. Eventually we pull a crank, which shows a wall moving, but it's on a timer, and no matter how hard you try, you will not be fast enough to get back to it. But we know from the pendulum puzzle earlier that nothing in the spirit realm moves, so we can use the crank, switch realms, and then make our way back. Now, if this is the first time you've played Soul Reaver, this is probably the exact moment you will want a guide. Remembering how the platform falling puzzle of Malkaya made very little mechanical sense but was visually obvious? Well, the cathedral makes no sense and isn't visually obvious, meaning there's a hell of a lot of backtracking and asking, what am I meant to do, which really breaks the pacing of the game. And if you do decide to go for a guide, do yourself a favour, don't use a YouTube video. Go for a classic 90s text-based ASCII art fan-made guide. God, I love these things. I remember as a kid I printed off complete guides just like this and sat on my floor following them to the letter to collect every spell and find every secret, and it was just the best time. I miss guides like this. Eventually I find the most difficult block puzzle yet, a complex mix of hieroglyphs, and when you do finish the first part, more blocks fall from the ceiling, and then after a good 30 minutes of pushing and flipping, I finally unlock another health relic. This wasn't even needed to finish the cathedral. Goddamn, so much of this game is extra content and you don't even realise. I actually do get lost for a while, because despite actually going the right way, you need to perform a mechanic the game has in no way told you about. In this room, these pipes have 3 lids. You need to interact with a lid to lift it up and find the right combination of open lids to create the correct noise to break more of the glass caps. But you never need to lift up a cap before this point. You never need to do this again. This is the perfect example of a single-use mechanic done badly. No prep, no warning, and no greater impact in the wider game. You will never need to do this again. With the bulbs broken, we flip some switches and make more updraft, and this gets us even higher into the cathedral. You can see now how this really feels like it would work as a late game area. Maybe the original ending of Activate the Cathedral had the players lifting up lids before they got here, so it did originally make sense. We push some sections of pipe into place and carry on through the spiderweb covered walls. Where Malkaya seemed to evolve into a math of writhing flesh, Zephon has gone for more of a Spider-Man thing. We twist some cogs and then we use the massive organ itself as a climbable, scalable part of the level, and I love it when platforming games use their set pieces as essential scenery. When the level itself isn't just a holder for platform design within, but is itself the platform design. It's like the bit of jumping across the houses earlier. It shows that the designers haven't just made a platform game around easily traversable platforms and then added in the set dressing of the location. They've looked at the locations themselves and said, how do we integrate this architecture into the flow of gameplay so it feels natural? While exploring the cathedral, it seems fitting to talk about the sound design. Soul Reaver doesn't have songs or catchy, recognizable beats as such. You won't find yourself humming the theme anytime soon. But what it does have in absolute bucket loads is atmosphere. The visuals and the audio ambience are used to set the mood, and that's what the music does throughout the whole game. It sets the mood. Low strings, deep rumbling bass, rushing water, ambient chills of snow, the ethereal dreamlike quality of the spirit realm. It's not so much music as it is emotional audio, and it nails it. There's no other way to explain how Soul Reaver feels beyond it feels like Soul Reaver. Find another teleport room and oh look, the symbol for Zephon is actually a bit spider-like, and this is how you end up remembering where gates go to. Symbol association with the feelings of the places. Eventually we find a dead human hunter holding a flaming crossbow, the pilot light still flickering, and while we can't take the item, it will be useful to us soon. And now we can walk into the heart of the cathedral, Zephon's lair.
Zephon, your visage becomes you. It's an appropriate reflection of your soul.
And you are not his handsome Raziel anymore. His precious firstborn son turned betrayer. You have missed so many changes, little Raziel. Look around you. See how the human's weapon of destruction has become my home. Indeed, my body. A cocoon of brick and granite from which to watch a pupating world.
A crevice in which to cower, only scuttling from the shadows to devour a victim already ensnared in your cowardly trap. But you've made the mistake of leaving me unbound, and it is you who must succumb to my will.
I love how grotesque all your brothers have become in this time you've been gone, from proud, noble vampires in the intro cinematic to, well, this. Remember I mentioned the design similarity to Elden Ring? Notice how there was a teleport gate room directly before the boss fight. The challenge isn't in tedious long runs back, but in the puzzle of the fight itself. Zephon's fight is pretty simple. It will stab its legs into the floor and you hit them until it spits eggs at you, and then you pick the eggs up, set them on fire using the pilot light from earlier, and then throw them back. After throwing 3 eggs, Zephon will burn down.
Consuming Zephon's apostate soul has bestowed on you a new gift. Like his vampire spawn, you are able to scale certain walls which are otherwise impassable, but only in the physical realm. In the spirit world, these insubstantial edifices will not support you.
Killing Zephon gets us our next skill, the ability to climb up certain walls, but only while in the physical realm, and much like phasing through gates, this opens up so much more of the map and so many more secrets. Replaying Soul Reaver, especially as a game that I very much like, is so frustrating because it's so close to being a perfect adventure game, held back by the tiny issues of knowing where you can use certain skills, not having a map, and having small one-off mechanics like lifting the lids. It's so frustrating that they almost had perfection. Now we can climb walls, we return to the pillars of the central room and climb up around the outside, traversing the room and unlocking the next area, the Tomb of the Seraphan.
The ancient tomb of the Seraphan, once impenetrably sealed, now ravaged by Nosgoth's upheavals, its mysteries lay exposed. In the time of Vorador, centuries before Cain was made, the Seraphan warrior priests waged a merciless war against the vampire tribes of Nosgoth. Emboldened by righteousness, they committed unspeakable and indiscriminate acts of violence, massacring fledglings and ancients alike. They decimated entire bloodlines in mere decades. Now their husks lay here, murderers enshrined.
Take heed, Raziel. A forgotten history lies within. Know thyself, though it may destroy you.
As I pulled the stone free, a sigh of sepulchral air escaped the inner chamber. I was not prepared for what lay beyond this threshold. These crypts, defiled caskets of Seraphan saints, bearing my brothers' names and my own. The irony of Cain's blasphemous act rushed in on me with the crushing force of revelation. Were my hands not as bloody as these? Worse, I had spilled the blood of my brothers, these very comrades whose tombs lay ravaged before me.
Yes, Raziel, you were a Seraphan, born of the same force that all but destroyed your race. Before the dawn of the Empire, you were chosen. Cain, Nosgoth's solitary self-declared monarch, plundered this tomb and raised you from these crypts. Breathing his vampiric gift into your defiled corpses, he resurrected you as his favored sons.
For this revelation to make much sense, players needed to have followed the plot of the first Blood Omen game, where noble human Cain is killed by some assassins, but brought back to life as a vampire. Cain goes on an epic quest to find a cure for vampirism, which involves him meeting Ariel, and then the Oracle of Nosgoth, later revealed to be Mobius the Time Streamer. Cain defeats the dark entities of Nosgoth, but then discovers the cure for vampirism is ultimately his own death. And he has become the unexpected successor of Ariel and is now in control of the Pillar of Balance, which keeps the lands in unity. Now, the original Blood Omen has two endings. You can choose to kill yourself, or you can choose to spite the world and go on living. And this is the canonical ending, so refusing to kill himself, the Pillar of Balance becomes corrupted. And in a final insult to time itself, Cain not only lives, but raises the body of the Sarafan priests, humans he once respected deeply, up as vampires themselves. This adds more weight to the Elder God's earlier description of the land. He said, to time itself, Cain not only lives, but raises the body of the Sarafan priests, humans he once respected deeply, up as vampires themselves. This adds more weight to the Elder God's earlier description of the land. He said it was covered in Cain's parasitic empire. The world has died because Cain chose to live. And your vendetta against Cain is revenge for your vampiric self being cast into the abyss for 500 years, your original human self being resurrected, and the Elder God's desire to not see the pillars continue to be corrupted. You are in effect the embodiment of Cain's defiance. You are a living paradox, a Sarafan vampire. The tomb itself also has one of the coolest realm transitions. Switching from the physical to the spiritual has the floor drop all the way beneath you and open up the next path toward the sunken abbey. And now we have the first mini-boss, important enough for a cutscene and a new technique, but not quite an actual character. This thing shoots projectiles at you, and once you defeat it by throwing it into the water, you can now charge up balls of energy and fire them from your hands. If you have the Soul Reaver active, you'll shoot from the blade. If you don't, you'll just throw a translucent orb of power. Now, these orbs can knock enemies back, stun enemies, smash glass windows, and even move blocks from a distance, so block puzzles are now even more complex. And it trains the player this straight away, because there's a target-looking thing on the wall almost encouraging you to shoot it, and when you do, it's a block which gets knocked backward, revealing a path, which is a lovely little sequence of events, and then more blocks that you can shoot to jump up higher. And here's a bit I always forget: a huge cavern with a boat in it. Soul Reaver excels at having vast parts of the map be both hidden and far larger than needed, so you're encouraged to explore. This boat also has a unique spear on it you can't find anywhere else. It's a harpoon. It's kind of a shame that different spears don't have different stats or different elemental damages. I feel they've missed a trick with design there. Onward to the sunken abbey and our next brother, Rahab. Walking into a new zone now feels less intimidating and more, okay, let's do this. We've got the skills and we've got the strengths to conquer. We know that vampires are weak to being impaled, water, and the sun, but Rahab has overcome his weakness to water at the cost of extreme weakness to the sun. And his brood are the same. Water won't kill these guys, but even the smallest touch of sunlight or fire will. While exploring around the abbey, I found this excellent Blender animation on YouTube of the entire Soul Reaver game world modelled in 3D, showing how interconnected everything really is. The brilliant use of vertical space in sections like the cathedral and the abbey. I have a real love for video game maps, and seeing a fan create something this amazing makes me even sadder that a regular player won't ever see how beautiful Soul Reaver's world is. I'll link this video in the description below. The sunken abbey is a lot smaller than the cathedral, but it's littered with false shortcuts. You'll head down a one-way system and find yourself flushed back out to the start of the level. It's not necessarily more complex, but it is longer because there are wrong choices. It's much more tedious to actually finish. This section on the rafters really takes advantage of the illusion of depth created by the limited draw distance of older hardware. If you could see the whole room, this bit wouldn't feel as gothic and adventurous and as deep, but with the inky blackness of the Beyond, Soul Reaver is using hardware limitations to enhance its dark atmosphere. The Abbey is another case of using the model of the world itself to enhance the platform, running across the outside buttresses, over the roof, and this lets you see where you started. And I think puzzles always feel much more real when you can see where you were and visually track your progress through the level. The route through this level also snakes around, which is reminiscent of Rahab's symbol, call the Coiled Serpent. We jump over this bell tower and ring this bell, another single-use mechanic which opens up a door below us. The critical path of the Abbey, when you remove the false shortcuts, is much shorter and more linear than the Cathedral. And finally, we reach the circular pillar room and our next brother.
Raziel.
Rahab, you have adapted well to your environment, for one so maladjusted.
Do not mock me, Raziel. You of all of us should respect the power bestowed by a limitation overcome. Cain said you would come.
You speak with the murderer?
You would do well to mind your blasphemous tongue.
What more did he tell you?
That you would destroy me.
I will indeed. But tell me, before I tear your soul from its moorings, do you know what we were before Cain spawned us?
Human.
Seraphan, Rahab, the antithesis of all we ever believed.
Does it matter? We were lost. He saved us.
Saved us? From what?
From ourselves.
So as with other bosses, what's the gimmick? Well, with no spears or fire available and water being useless, it's time for sunlight. So we use our new force projectile skill to smash all of the windows around the top of the room, and eventually you will roast Rahab alive. Absorbing Rahab's soul gives us the same resistance to water that he had cultivated over 500 years, and we can now swim in the physical realm. Swimming opens up a world of possibility. There's no swordplay or melee combat underwater, but you can still shoot force projectiles. We're told to return to the original death vortex and use our new resistance to water to cross the threshold and swim up to our brother Dumar. But if we go and explore the Abbey even further, we can find the hidden upgrade to the Soul Reaver, the Fire Reaver. Plunging your blade into this sacred flame upgrades the Soul Reaver, and every time we find a fire source from now on, you can dip the blade into the flames to enhance its strength. The Fire Reaver will automatically burn enemies, and the projectiles you shoot are now fireballs. There were actually multiple upgrades to the Soul Reaver sword planned but then cut at the last minute. However, they do still exist in-game, and you can use the debug menu to unlock the visual overrides, even though they're mechanically the same, including the Sunlight Reaver or the black and red Cain Reaver. So we swim past these underwater egg sacs around a few tunnels, and then this room might be familiar. A huge room with an opening halfway up, leading to a ramp, and there's our old spear. We are back at Raziel's clan from the start. This is one of the reasons spear. Huge room with an opening halfway up, leading to a ramp, and there's our old spear. We are back at Raziel's clan from the start. This is one of the reasons Soul Reaver gets compared to Dark Souls. The map loops back on itself as you unlock new routes. Now we can swim, we can actually unlock access to the Human Citadel, a completely separate secret area of the game, not needed in any way for completion. If we open up the world map drawing, it's hidden here. Through the small passageway access world map drawing, it's hidden here. Through the small passageway accessed from the central abyss, but we'll come back to this later. So back to the Vortex of Death, and now northeast to the snowy ruins of Dumar. There are several rooms full of water to prevent you from reaching this place early, and then there's this giant outdoor sundial. Remember this? It's the entrance to the final part of the game, but we need one final skill to activate it. We climb this giant wall and then glide on over into the fortress. Now this whole section is much more focused on puzzle rather than combat because Dumar's clan is all already dead.
This city once teemed with the life of my kind. Could it be that other clans had suffered the same fate as mine? In his madness, could Cain spare none of his brood?
It was not Cain, but Dumar's own arrogance that brought the downfall of his clan. These are human weapons, Raziel. Believing themselves invincible, Dumar and his offspring failed to see an attack coming from the least likely assailants. Complacent in their arrogance, they were taken by surprise, allowing the human vampire hunters to decimate their ranks with little resistance. The few that escaped have been reduced to scavengers.
Dumar got complacent, was attacked, and his clan was wiped out by humans, so you're left to adventure through the husk of his base. And this is where the tedious versus fun puzzle design starts to skirt on the tedious side. The rooms are vast, and the block puzzles need you to shoot through various grills and switch planes often. There are lots of corridors and ledges, and while it's an interesting layout, there's a lot of connecting filler sections not relating to the actual base itself. This is a perfect example of an area feeling like it's been designed as a puzzle first and not a realistic area with a puzzling route through it. It actually loses a lot of the charm the cathedral and the abbey had because this is a very square, blocky base. Parts of it feel like a test level more than an actual military stronghold. This is the first time you feel like you're inside a video game and not a realistic location. There are three main parts of this area. The first one is this water and block puzzle room, which needs you to empty a room of water and then move a block from one side of the now empty tank to the other so you can stack up a tower tall enough to jump into a ventilation shaft. And this gets you to the flamethrower room, another massive human-built defense against the vampiric menace. An absolutely enormous flamethrower, needing you to activate some gas pumps on one side and then pull a switch which fires a burst of flame and blows the doors open to a new route. And then this vertical stack of floors, which you can climb by switching back and forth between realms and jumping up the floors as they morph and twist to different heights. This feels like a very proof of concept way of doing what the cathedral did with pipes. And then you finally glide over this fenced off area into a central monolith and tip it up and smash your way into Dumar's throne room. Dumar himself is staked to a chair, but as his corpse is here, we know he's not dead, so we pull all three spears out from his body, he dusts off a 500-year-old cramp, and gets right back up.
Unbound at last. I thank you, brother.
Your thanks are premature, Dumar. I have not forgotten whose hands bore me into the abyss.
The centuries in limbo have honed my strength. Not even Cain is my equal.
Even the strongest vampire is vulnerable.
We shall test your thesis, Raziel.
My bloodthirst has been superseded by an even darker hunger. I will consume your soul before this day is done.
Now this fight is deceiving. The arena doesn't seem gimmicky, and you've seen the spears pin the body down, so maybe you think it's a case of fight and impale him again, but no, Dumar is one of the more interesting gimmicks. And his fight actually plays around with the unwritten rules of gaming. Indeed, rules Soul Reaver itself has been observing up until this point, but you as a player may not realise it. The rules of boss fights happen in boss arenas. The confines of the conflict are always known. The boss can't leave the arena. That's never been specifically stated, it's just been designed around. But if you do stay and fight Dumar in this room, he'll use a variety of attacks against you, stomping on the floor, which stuns you, and then running around you, generating a trail of energy which closes in on you and saps your health. So the fight seems impossible within this arena, and that's because it is, but Dumar is different. As a boss, he isn't limited to his throne room. In fact, he will chase you through the entire facility, and you need to use that against him. Remember the giant flamethrower room from earlier? You need to lure Dumar all the way back through his own base into the center of this room, activate the gas, and then pull the lever while he's standing in the middle.
Consuming Duma's soul empowers you to wind a constricting band of spectral energy around your enemies. This energy manifests itself in both the spectral and material realms, and in the physical world, it can be employed to manipulate otherwise immovable objects.
Absorbing Duma's soul gives us the final needed skill, the Constrict ability. While in the physical realm, run around an object twice. On the second rotation, you'll begin creating an ethereal band of energy, and when you complete the band, twice. The Constrict ability. Absorbing Duma's soul gives us the final needed skill, the Constrict ability. While in the physical realm, run around an object twice. On the second rotation, you'll begin creating an ethereal band of energy, and when you complete the band, you'll either kill the enemy or move the object that you have constricted. This ability is needed to unlock some of the final secret spells from earlier, including all the way back at Raziel's clan where we first flipped a switch to lower a bridge, but more importantly, we can now go and find every hidden health artifact or magic glyph. You can dive into the hidden pools in the physical world and then climb up scalable surfaces and venture into the hidden canyons with skulls the size of castles. You can climb into an abandoned stronghold through the architecture, and as a true testament to how big this game is, I found some new areas when replaying this game for this video. Testament to how big climb into an abandoned stronghold through the architecture, and as a true testament to how big this game is, I found some new areas when replaying this game for this video, and I've finished this many times. You can find the hidden storm temple and the block puzzle within, or shoot this block away using the force projectile, which opens up a climbable surface and gets you more artifacts and a hidden teleportation gate. And eventually, you'll even find some magic glyphs. So how does the magic system work? You'll notice that every time you've wanted to switch realms from physical to spiritual, you press select, and switch realms is a spell that you can cast for free, but there are many other spell slots. They're just currently empty. You unlock all these via finding glyphs. If you push these pillars over in a hidden cave, you'll unlock the force glyph. Unlocking a glyph increases your reserves of magical blue energy, and using a glyph costs energy. You can see the cost in the spell screen. And you can refill your energy by standing in the blue refill portals or killing enemies that have blue sparkles around them, or if you're lucky, finding blue floating orbs which only appear in the world after you have at least one glyph. If you manage to find all the glyphs, you'll have a maximum of 52 magical energy, and some spells are effective nukes, bathing the area in sunlight and burning anything nearby to death. This map actually shows you where to find all the hidden glyphs, and while you don't need to do this to finish the game, it's fun to at least say you have. And I believe it's this attitude toward hiding content which makes Soul Reaver feel so magical. Many modern games simply wouldn't feel comfortable spending so much development time on an area or a system that a player could just miss. But Soul Reaver did, Dark Souls did, Elden Ring did, and it shows massive confidence in the replayability of your product. You don't need to show the player everything on their first time because you know they're going to play it many times and you want them to have new things to find every time. This is where the human city comes in. If you didn't kill anyone, you can just waltz straight in and take the spell there. You know, I'm willing to bet there are people watching this video right now who have finished Soul Reaver who didn't even know there was a human citadel in the game. But once you're done exploring everywhere, return to the snowy tundra to the giant sundial. Use your constrict ability and this will open up the final part of the game, the Oracle's Caves, where every skill you've got will be tested. For this part to really make sense, you need to have played the prequel Blood Omen, but for our purposes, just know that Cain wants to control time, and the time streamer Mobius is connected to his whole master plan. So we warp from the physical to the spiritual, and the cave wall creeps open just enough for us to slip in. So we constrict a few buttons and open some massive doors, and then complete a rather complex block puzzle of taking blocks into and out of certain openings to set all these massive doors open at the same time. Nothing dangerous, it just takes a while. We then use our projectile ability to shoot some boxes into positions, and this lets you open more gates, and then I discover you can accidentally projectile multiple enemies onto half-moon spikes behind them, which just felt super cool to do. Constrict some more pillars at this point to open more doors, and this whole place is just one giant lock. Eventually we constrict a cauldron and open the doors to the inner sanctum the chronoplast. A statue of Mobius overlooks a giant clockwork puzzle, so we use a lever to direct two beams of light onto the mechanism and open up the floor below. We push a few blocks down, arrange another puzzle, and then jump into the lower tunnels. And despite being the physical world, the whole area is beginning to warp and bend to look like the spectral. It's even beginning to share the green and blue colour palette, showing how the real and the spiritual are merging the deeper we go. These doors are locked with a colour combination lock, so we constrict some more items, and this whole final area feels so densely packed with mechanics that we've not seen before, it can feel like they were rushing to pack in every idea they had. Instead of pacing these ideas